ahead. So hi, everyone. Welcome again to this group, and we look forward to having this conversation. As Cynthia just said, my name is Pam Cook, and I'm from Teachers College from the program in nutrition. And most of my work is with children and education and behavior change. So I think what was said at the very end by Anna Maria is very much fits into my work. But we really look forward to being a big, broad discussion about enablers of transformation and getting ideas from you, as well as then what could be research, interdisciplinary research that could help lead to this, and then true action steps that can lead to that change. So we really, really look forward to talking to all of you.
So thank you, Pam. I am the other coordinator for the Breakout group. My name is Małgosia Madejewicz. As Cynthia said, I'm at the Center for Climate Systems Research. I'm an economist. And my work in food systems has mostly dealt with studying what adaptation and risk management strategies improve production and livelihoods in the presence of climate variability and climate change under different environmental and socioeconomic conditions. And I just wanted to continue Pam's introduction to this group. We've been tasked with discussing how society can bring about some of these big transformations in food systems that we've been discussing today. And the questions that Cynthia put up and that we'll put up in a minute that we're going to want to address for each of the transformations that we talk about are, we'll want to discuss what are the barriers to the transformation, also opportunities. What is the research and practice that can help to bring them about? And what are some of the first actions that need to be taken? But before we can dive into the questions, I think we'll need to decide which major transformations in the food system we want to discuss, because we only have 40 minutes. We're going to have to sort of move through this pretty quickly. We'll only have time to discuss a few. So we wanted to take suggestions from the group about the transformations of the food system that we should focus on in the discussion. And we're just proposing to kind of categorize them by the two sides of the food system, one being the food supply, which includes production, storage, processing, distribution, the other one being food consumption, which includes nutrition. Obviously, both of these are very multidimensional. As we've heard today, they're very linked, but just to make sure that we touch on both of those sides. Before we dive in and dive into these questions, we have 12 participants online. So I think in order to facilitate discussion, we could go around just very briefly for each person to say their name, their affiliation, and what their expertise in the food system arena is, if we could. So I'll just go down the list as I see your, oops, maybe I won't because I'm not seeing names. How do I do this? I'm not seeing names for some reason on these.
I mean, I could go around to everyone that I can see. I agree. The participants haven't been coming up. It's up to you.
Do you see, can you call out names?
Sure. So let's start with Nicholas.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for this opportunity, very interesting topic. I'm an Air Institute postdoc working in the IRI. And I think that I would like to go over a point about innovative ways to approach these challenges. Actually, this is related with my research with crowdsourcing and innovative ways to engage people and incentivize people to be involved, not only to inform, but even to generate information that is relevant. So I think that could be an option, and it applies for supply and consumption for both sides, I think.
Okay, thank you. Allison?
Hi, my name is Allison Rose. I work here at the Earth Institute for a project called CCAFS, the CGAR research program on climate change, agriculture, and food security. I'm based at IRI. And our work is primarily on helping farmers adapt to climate variability. So also, as Nico mentioned, both on the production and consumption side.
Thank you. Anne?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Stapleton. I'm at the USDA Department of Agriculture in the US, National Institute for Food. So I fund work in upstream basic research and applied research in agriculture. I'm particularly interested myself in data science and digital ag. Fund programs in that area that's one of my main parts of my portfolio. In this case, I'm here to learn. I'm especially interested in the implications of some of these digital transformations for food supply. So I'm here to learn more about how the food supply works. I'm particularly interested myself in the spatial variation of diets over time. So how seasonal or weekly diet changes play into this system.
Oh, very interesting. Ruth?
Yes, hello, Ruth DeFries. I'm at Columbia University and I work on land use at a landscape scale, particularly the environmental dimensions, but working on that topic quickly gets you into food systems and people and nutrition. So I don't know what to say about what I am.
Great, okay. Your name isn't up, but I think it's Weston? Oh, maybe not. Okay.
Weston's in the other group.
Okay. Okay. Rafaela?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rafaela Kozar. I'm a research fellow at ICRAF, Indonesia, but I'm based in Japan. I'm working on my doctorate, actually, on food systems transformation, and I'm specifically looking at governance issues and especially governing diversity in landscapes. So trying to look at both diversity of ecosystems, but also diversity in place-based knowledge, and on the social side, innovations and livelihoods and things like that.
Very good. Brian?
Hi, my name is Brian Davies. I'm in Climate and Sustainable Food Resources of Toronto, Canada. And I think the two big areas of transformation for me would be the dietary transformation and digital transformation. Both of those have been mentioned, so I'd put those on the list. Thank you.
Thank you. Dee Williams?
Hi, yeah, my name is Deanne Williams. I'm with the Center for a Livable Future at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And I am the Senior Program Officer for the Industrial Food Animal Production Program. And we just do basic food system change, equity, as well as sustainability and environmental research.
Very good. JJ?
Maybe we can just ask is there anyone else who hasn't introduced
Yeah,
themselves?
there's one other person
Okay.
whose name, yeah.
Okay. Should we, Pam, should we just
Tim.
go ahead?
Tim.
Sorry, I didn't know if you wanted me to go, if you were going to say my name. I'm Tim. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan in the US, and my research, I look at risk and resilience in smallholder agricultural systems. And one thing that I'm interested in talking about that I don't know much about is subsidies for industrial agriculture. And I think that's like a big barrier toward or against transformation.
Okay. So maybe it's addressing subsidies could be the enabler of transformation that it could be helpful. So now, why don't just go ahead and I think we're a small enough group that people can maybe say, and we'll add them onto the list of transformations. And we're going to basically, we want to spend about, and we still have, I think, about 10 minutes on this, which would give us time, probably then give us about 5 to 6 minutes for each of the 3 big questions that we want to address about some of these transformations. So we would love to get more on this list.
So just to add to that, we probably have more like 6 or 7 minutes on this. But so,
Okay.
so why doesn't each person or whoever wants to contribute sort of the transformation that is most salient to you, that you would like to get into more detail on in terms of discussing the barriers, opportunities, and actions that can help to bring it about?
And it's okay to say that you liked somebody else's transformation and want to say that that's important as well. So
this is Dee Williams. I'll go ahead and go. And mine is actually more environmental sustainability of agriculture.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And it can, just to check, can people see my screen as I'm typing these in?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Anne wrote in the chat, seamless shifts from linear to network supply chains.
Seamless shifts from what?
Linear to network supply chains. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Anne, briefly?
Sure, that's my short way to put it. But that's basically a way of into the robustness, resilience, etc. of your supply chain. So instead of having a network where the paths can change quickly.
Which I think sounds like it would be making it more resilient because it's not so stuck in one way of doing things, if I'm understanding you right.
That's the idea. I don't think we've transformed that though.
Yeah, yeah.
We've so far just seen what happens when you are linear.
Yes, we see the challenges with linear. Okay. And I think we want to get on there the addressing subsidies, maybe that somebody said before, I think Tim. Who else has something?
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say addressing subsidies. I think maybe maybe we'll talk about that when we're talking about obstacles and opportunities or actions that can be taken. I'm not sure if that's a transformation in itself, which is why I didn't put it down. But if
maybe I could. So someone just wrote in the chat, greater agri-biodiversity, and so I guess when I mentioned that, I meant subsidies that favor that, like higher biodiverse,
higher biodiversity.
Yeah, and maybe that comes into the environmental sustainability.
Sustainability. Should we combine it with that environmental sustainability?
So I'll just add something. I like all of these transformations, but along those same lines, maybe it's combined with subsidies, is the research investments. What types of crops, what types of production systems get research investment and extension and sort of research dollars? That's a leadership question.
I think that that's different than what kind of research, which is one of our questions, because it is the transformation is changing the structure of what kind of research gets invested in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that could
speaking as a funder myself, we are act more as agents and less as change management. So it has to be bottom up. You have to have essentially reviewers who agree that this is important for federally funded. Less true for foundations, but for federally funded, which is a big chunk of the money, it has to have an existing base of support from stakeholders and reviewers in order to get through the federal system. It's a known limitation, but it's lots of money.
Yes, Brian, if I may, I think an important one here is adding on a transformation from a linear to a circular agriculture, agri-food system.
So let me capture roots and from linear to circular food production system, did you say?
Yeah, it could be any one of those, agricultural, agri-food, or food production.
Okay, and I think the defining research priorities probably belongs on the other side as well. do we have any transformations that are more about consumption? I mean, certainly the ones that we have put under production can lead to improvements in nutrition. But is there something that belongs more clearly on the consumption to nutrition side?
Behavioral economics of the transformation. How do you scale it and supply it at the right spatial scale? Because not everyone responds the same way to the nudges. So spatial diversity of nudging.
So can I say something like advancing behavioral change in different contexts? Is that captured or not?
Incorporating diversity.
Advancing behavioral change while incorporating diversity.
Diversity. Mm-hmm. That's what we don't have yet.
Yeah.
And then I think that relates to what Jennifer was saying at the very end of her talk, which is if we make these changes, how do we help ensure, particularly because we've had the food supply has been what it is, how do we help assure that people have the enthusiasm, knowledge, and skills to eat this? I mean, I think what people eat is related to the food supply, so it's intricately linked. People can only eat what's in the food supply, but I think understanding that dynamics seems like what you're saying, Anne.
I think tied in with consumption is also the not only food waste, but the waste along the entire post-consumption food, plastic waste, packaging waste. There's a big problem there. And maybe that goes back a bit in part to what the diet is.
Okay.
I think maybe important to add is to the waste is both food as well as packaging.
Okay. Maybe I think we need to, if we're going to have 10 minutes for each of our questions, we should move on to our questions. Shall we pick one of these to begin with, and then we can dive into it in more detail in the questions, and then move on to the next one as time allows? Or I guess maybe the way we should do this is address the first question for one of these, and then we can address the first question for a few of them if time allows. So our first question is, what are the barriers and opportunities to effective change? And what actions should be taken to overcome the barriers and realize the opportunities? And we should try to identify the key barriers and key opportunities. Should we start with this big one of environmental sustainability of agriculture and greater biodiversity?
I think a good thing about that is that it is, as you just said, very broad. And so
Big
I think it might be a good starting place if everybody else agrees. Okay, we're getting some thumbs up.
Okay, sorry, as I have limited capacity to see what's going on because I'm sharing this screen. So so launching into the first question, on the transformation being environmental sustainability of agriculture, greater biodiversity. First question being, let's do the barriers first. What are the principal barriers to effective change? Please, whoever wants to contribute.
I think, this is Nicholas, I think that one of the main barriers actually is to inform consumers and improve like this transparency and traceability. I think that at this point there are a lot of mixed signals that you really don't know actually if some of the supply is actually contributing or not to these environmental or biodiversity goals. So I think that definitely more transparency and traceability is important It's an important barrier.
And if I could just, sorry, this is not responsive to what you're saying, but Nicholas, I just wanted to check, are you being the rapporteur for this session?
That's a yes. He said yes.
Sorry, I can't see you.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Thanks so much. And thank you, Nicholas, very much for doing that, for being
Yes.
the rapporteur. I didn't acknowledge that at the beginning.
And thank you for that comment. Oh, go ahead, Ruth.
Oh, can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a really question for the behavioral economist. Where's the attention needed? Is the leverage point at the individual level? I mean, it's really hard to tell people what they should eat. They're going to ignore you. I think, at least people I try to tell what they eat, they ignore me. Is that the right level of intervention, or is it the marketing level, or is it the tax? What's the right level that really gets change?
So, my whole career has been on how do you create effective interventions that actually do have people listen to it. And it's interesting because, and it might be wherever you sit, you can see the challenges outside of that is and I think this is what Jennifer's talk was about too, is in so many communities where I work, it's people want to do the right thing and they actually are very receptive to it and they don't have access to it. And so I think maybe the other end of the challenge of this is we do need to look, as has been said many times today, we do need to look at technologies and digital advances. And yet when we look at those, I think we have to be very careful. And somebody said this earlier, I think it was Mario, of really looking at the possible unintended consequences of those to make the right choices about what we should put into so that we can get the right foods to the right people. Why is it that even in rich countries such as the United States, and this is true in poor countries as well, is so many people just don't have access to the foods that would nourish them. Right,
but then even people who could afford it make what we would consider not great decisions. So that's it.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think it takes a lot of complex work, and working with school children and to basically have it become part of life. I don't know. I think it is complex, and I think we've also had a lot of marketing, which is, Ruth, what you said, that has worked for decades to make people convinced that cooking is drudgery. And so that will take a while to undo.
Just to add to that, there are a number of, there is some research on kind of community level interventions that seem to be particularly effective, but maybe the most useful thing for us to do is to note down that that in order to overcome this barrier, there's research needed on how you change attitudes towards the food you eat. And that would go under our second question. I just wanted to add to that I think Nicholas raised a very important point that there are many ways in which information feeds into environmental sustainability. It's not just about the food that you eat. It's also, for example, in agriculture, being able to maintain your production in the face of climate variability and climate change, having the information that you need to manage the risks involved and maintain your production as the climate changes. So having effective climate information services, that's something that particularly for those smallholder farmers that produce, as we heard today, 50 to 75% of the world foods population, of the food that we eat, 50 to 75% of the food, they need much better access to information that is useful to them that they can actually apply in farm management. Is there anything, are there other barriers that we want to mention here?
I would characterize what you just said as a scaling problem. There are lots of pilot studies showing how access to information works. We have no idea how to scale this up to make a big enough difference to the food system. So.
And you mean information to people who are producing food and all the way through the food chain as well as consumers, right?
Yeah, decision support for producers.
Decision
we know how to
support
do
for
it
producers, right?
on an individual sort of scale. Even in some, there's a lot of little pilot studies that are great examples, and we've learned from them and we know how to do this well. We really don't have any idea how you would possibly scale that up.
And I think maybe related to that is there are small programs that help farmers with those transitions, but it would need to become a lot bigger part in any, since you're from USDA and US Farm Bill policy, but then in other countries as well, that would support those kinds of transitions. And I think at this point in time, the programs that support that in the Farm Bill, when I look at the breakdown of money, end up being these very small parts of money that are, like in the tens and 20 millions compared to a very large Farm Bill. And we celebrate when it goes up from 10 to 15 million, but it's still much, much, much too small to be able to support farmers that want to make these transitions to be able to do it.
And I would characterize that as a mismatch between the need, the availability of the data, the ability of the public and private sector to share data adequately to scale this. Again, we have a dreadful time scaling up data sharing, especially when you mix public and private data. We really have no idea how to do that. So that's a whole research area in itself, scaling up appropriate data sharing. And just thinking about how you would build this, knowing that policy is going to allow things, but probably not allow them quickly enough to scale up. So policy often, sadly, follows. You can get pilot things approved, but scaling up policy is often last on the list.
And off the record, I guess maybe, which is the opportunities, is any ways that you think that could be done to help to advocate for that? Because as you being with the USDA, I think you need outside people to be advocating for it to make it happen.
We need behavioral economics for reviewers and stakeholders. We do ask for their input in government. We rarely get what I would think of as transformative, system-changing, loud, consistent input from everybody. And that's what'll change a policy if the constituents absolutely demand it be done. So it's a policy, it's politics. So it's all that behavioral stuff, which for a scientist, for most of us who work in these areas, we start off as scientists, it's a big learning curve to realize that you're actually talking about that intersection of science and politics. And therefore, all of those other kinds of things apply. So, I myself am keenly interested in infrastructure for policy. How could you get really good stakeholder input? What do you need to do to support that?
That's a very important one. I just want to highlight that what these barriers are and how the solutions work is going to differ a little bit depending on where we're talking about. It's context specific. I mean, there are some principles that apply generally, but really appropriate design is pretty context specific.
And I need to, I have, my father's being transitioned back home. I need to just turn off my video and I'll be back in a minute. So I'm very
sorry. Sure, Pam. So the other barrier that I would add here, just to add another one other than information, is financial services. So often people may, particularly on the production side, people may have information about what it is that they need to do, but especially smallholder farmers in developing countries, don't have the ability to do it because of lack of insurance, credit, ability to save places to put their savings and so on. So that's a big one that there's a lot of research on it, but there's certainly that can guide policy, that can guide action, but the action is sorely needed. I think what we've sort of changed from, I initially proposed that we take one of these and then that we address first question for a number of these, but I think what we've done is we've sort of addressed a number of the questions for the environmental sustainability transformation. So maybe we can just finish that and move on to another one of the transformations. So can we talk a little bit, are there any other thoughts about what are the other primary research and action needs to advance transformation in this area, still talking about environmental sustainability and biodiversity?
This is Dee Williams. I would say that we need more research on the economic benefits and the ecosystem services that are provided by sustainable agriculture.
And then I might add, you also need the fintech to support payment for that, the financial technology.
Correct, thank you.
Yeah. There's some startups, there's some pilots, but I don't know, that we have any good way to scale up these kinds of payments in a way that, especially considering that that's basically often either country specific or at even a smaller scale.
Okay, great.
One thing I'm thinking about related to this is like large agribusinesses, and so they have like a lot of political power and a lot of money, and I don't know if there is a way to like get them to change the system such that they get on board with the sustainability transition, but I think that could be a powerful thing if there are ways to do that.
I think
there's actually a substantial amount of money from the big ag going into that, but only around things that support their existing systems. So it is a limited slice of that pie. It's important. The companies themselves are
and do you think that that's ultimately helpful and will speed up the process, or would be more of a hindrance and slowing it down because they are sticking with what's within their system and within basically what's bringing them profits? I'm just curious from your perspective.
It doesn't hurt. And sometimes that can really help if you pick the right combination of people and the right combination of policies. But it's not going to be a panacea. In the end, you really need the public participation too. Companies can do a lot around climate change, especially energy. The financial sector can do a lot, but it really takes all of us.
So, sorry, just to, we could keep talking about this one, but we have basically 5 minutes left in the breakout group. Should we take on another one of these transformations? Should we address one from the food consumption side? Does anyone have a strong feeling about which one to discuss next?
Did you get Rafaela's from the chat? That's really good.
Sorry, I gotta find my chat. What is it? So research and action, the allocation of environmental rights and benefits among stakeholders in future imagined systems. Okay, Rafaela, do you want to speak about that for a minute?
Sure, I'm just adding on to everyone's thoughts for back to the biodiversity one, and just thinking about equity issues mainly, and this gap in allocation and justice especially, and who gets to decide these new food systems, and what do the transformations look like, and how do you really think about in advance what are going to be the costs and benefits that different stakeholders should bear.
So this is sort of foreseeing the costs and benefits of advancing environmental sustainability. Is that?
Yeah, along those lines.
Two different stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Is it also making a viable livelihood out of small-scale agriculture? Because many small-scale farmers do not want to see their children become small-scale farmers, so precarious. Is that part of what you meant, Rafaela?
Sure. It would include then, right, how smallholders in particular view and imagine transformations in food systems and how they might modernize or change livelihoods and protect their livelihoods, and their role in particular in smallholder farming systems and moving towards greater diversity.
Maybe we want to spend our last minute or two with Nicholas if you have any questions about the report back.
Yes, yeah, I just want to add, based on the notes that I have taken during the conversation, that there is a lot of interest in scaling, in equality issues, in generate a new vision for young people that is involved in a small or are smallholders. But my big question here is how to materialize that, how to generate the environment so that this can happen. And I think that, and I'm sorry for insist because this is the topic that I propose, but I think that digital technologies can be a concrete way to facilitate that information, that flow, that connections, and even not expecting that large agribusiness take the initiative, as Tim also was mentioning, but giving some voice and empowering some agents that are critical to scale. That is another word that you were mentioning here. So I think that all of this is important, but I think that in concrete actions and first steps, we need to understand what are the technologies or the environment that is going to facilitate those connections, that scaling, and that new vision for farmers.
And maybe I really, really like that. And maybe to add on to it, which is I think what I've heard everyone saying, is that scaling and the digital to get the information is to get out what Anne had said, what can work to farmers in ways that make it work, can get out that information to policymakers to realize what kind of policies are needed to scale. And then maybe most important and undergirding all of that is better information to the public that can help to push and drive the changes that we need. So I feel like that kind of ties together some of what was said throughout the conversation.
And I think just to add to that, so it's information at various, so it's disseminating information at various levels. So it's not just the public, it's also, so it's farmers, but policy level as well, information of various kinds. And what we started talking about, one of the other next steps is changing attitudes or changing mindsets. So an action that is needed is more research into how do you change the mindsets of people with respect to their diets, and possibly the production, the kinds of crops that they grow. This is an issue that we're encountering in a number of countries as well, how to shift farmers into more nutritionally rich foods crops that may not be quite as entrenched, that may not be currently entrenched in their production system.
And I would add something that ties those together.
Sure.
And that's the question of trust of information, accuracy, precision, reliability, on-time delivery, robustness. Essentially, I sum that all up as being able to trust the information you get and act on it. And then how do people feel like they trust it?
And another next step that sort of ties a lot of that together are financial services, appropriate financial services to enable people to take action, to change their behavior.
Definitely. Do we need to
transition? And I think there's research tied to each one of those actions. So yes, we're supposed to rejoin the main group at this point. I guess we've only had time to discuss one of the transformations. Thank you all so much for your input. Really appreciate it. This has been very informative. So we'll see you back in the, unless anyone has any last comments. No? Then we'll see you back in the big, you need to get out of this meeting and go back to the link for the main group.